them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
You know, when a president issues a pardon, it really shines a spotlight on how individual lives can suddenly get caught up in, well, high-level politics. It's this fascinating intersection.
It really is.
And that's exactly where we're focusing today. We're doing a deep dive into the recent pardon former President Trump gave to Scott Howard Jenkins.
Yeah, and this one is, well, it's particularly interesting because of who it is, Scott Howard Jenkins, right? The former sheriff of Culpeper County, Virginia. And the conviction wasn't minor. It was for pretty serious bribery offenses he was convicted of.
Exactly. We're looking at a Fox News piece here that lays it all out. Jenkins was found guilty on, well, multiple counts. Conspiracy, honest services fraud.
And bribery, too, right? Connected to programs getting federal money?
Yes, 7 counts of that.
Yeah.
And it all stemmed from bribes, apparently over $75,000 total.
Let's maybe unpack those charges just a bit more. So 1 count of conspiracy, you said 4 of honest services fraud, and those 7 bribery counts. Now, honest services fraud, that's basically about an official misusing their position for their own gain, right?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And the court.
Yeah.
It handed down a pretty hefty sentence, 10 years in prison. He was actually scheduled to report.
A decade. Yeah, that's substantial. And you mentioned it wasn't just him involved.
No, not at all. The Fox News article, it names names. Businessmen like Rick Rahim, Frederick Gumbiner, James Metcalf,
Okay.
plus at least 5 others. And get this, 2 of them were actually FBI undercover agents.
Wow, undercover. So it sounds like a pretty extensive operation they uncovered.
It does. And what was it all centered around? What was Jenkins actually doing?
It revolved around appointing people as auxiliary deputy sheriffs. That was the service, so to speak, he was providing for the bribes.
Okay, auxiliary deputies. So what does that entail? Were these like actual working deputies?
Well, that's the key point. The article stresses that the individuals paying the bribes were allegedly untrained, unvetted, and weren't really performing legitimate law enforcement duties for the county. It wasn't about needing help.
So the picture painted is more like he was selling the status, the badge, the credentials.
Exactly. Trading official authority for personal benefit. That was the prosecution's case and what the jury ultimately agreed with.
And that benefit, again, over $75,000. Cash and campaign contributions, the report says.
Really highlights the alleged scale of it all.
Okay, so that's the conviction side. Now, let's shift to the pardon itself. How did Trump announce this?
Well, according to the article, it was a post on Truth Social. Seems to be his go-to for these kinds of announcements.
Right, and his reasoning.
Yeah.
What did the post actually say? It sounds like he had a very clear narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Very strong language. The article quotes him saying Jenkins and his wife were, quote, dragged through hell by a corrupt and weaponized Biden Justice Department.
Wow. Okay, so blaming the Justice Department directly.
Yes, and he didn't stop there. He also took aim at the judge in the trial, Robert Ballou.
Oh, really? What did he say about the judge?
He claimed Judge Ballou improperly excluded exculpatory evidence that could have helped Jenkins, presumably.
I see. So the argument is that the trial itself was flawed because evidence was kept out.
That's the core of his justification, yes. That Jenkins didn't get a fair shake in court.
And it sounds like he connects this specific case to maybe a broader pattern he sees.
He does. The Post apparently goes on to criticize, quote, radical left or liberal judges, saying they allow evidence based on feeling, not the rules.
So he's framing it as part of a, systemic problem.
Exactly. That seems to be the argument.
So from Trump's perspective, Jenkins isn't someone who, abused his office, but more like a victim.
Pretty much. He calls Jenkins a wonderful person who was persecuted. And the pardon, he says, is to end an unfair sentence.
And the article makes a point of saying it's a full and unconditional pardon.
Right. And that's important legally. It basically wipes the slate clean, nullifies the conviction federally.
Okay. Now, did the article mention anything about Jenkins' own view before this happened?
It did, actually. It mentions a statement Jenkins made previously. He had apparently expressed hope that Trump would step in.
So this wasn't entirely out of the blue for him, maybe.
It seems like he was hoping for it. He reportedly said something like, if the administration heard his side, which he felt didn't come out at trial, Trump would help him.
Interesting. And where did he say this?
The article says it was during a webinar for the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association.
Gotcha. So he clearly had this possibility in mind, which, brings us back to the whole idea of presidential pardons. It's a significant power.
It absolutely is. And historically, it's been used in, well, all sorts of ways. Sometimes for clemency, sometimes in situations that feel more political. It's quite a broad power for federal offenses.
And like we said at the start, this specific pardon, it just raises so many questions. People who support Trump might see this exactly as he framed it, correcting an injustice.
That's definitely one perspective, yeah. That narrative of someone being unfairly targeted.
But then the critics...
Well, critics would likely argue it undermines the whole legal process. A jury heard the evidence, came to a verdict.
Right.
And a pardon like this, especially with this kind of justification, could be seen as, well, interfering with that. Maybe even eroding the deterrent effect of prosecution if political connections seem to override the outcome.
That's a crucial point. A jury did find him guilty. So this pardon throws a big political wrench into what was a judicial finding. Makes you think about public trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Trust in the justice system, trust in law enforcement itself. When a conviction is overturned like this, by pardon, especially for an official,
Yeah.
What message does that send?
Yeah.
Does it make people feel the system is fair? Or does it breed cynicism that maybe justice isn't applied equally? That perception can be really damaging.
And focusing back on the actual crime selling these auxiliary badges, that specific act raises its own set of alarms, right? About who gets to have law enforcement authority.
Definitely. The idea that someone could essentially buy their way into that kind of role with a badge and credentials without the proper training or vetting, that has serious potential implications for public safety, for the integrity of law enforcement. It highlights how these auxiliary roles need really careful oversight.
So just to kind of wrap up where we've been in this deep dive, we looked at Scott Jenkins's conviction bribery, honest services fraud, selling these auxiliary positions for quite a bit of money.
Right. Over $75,000. Then we looked at former President Trump's pardon. Full, unconditional.
And his reasoning, alleging an unfair trial, excluded evidence, political motivation from the Justice Department.
And we also noted Jenkins himself had previously hoped for something like this.
So it really is this collision, isn't it? Individual case, big political power, very different ideas about what justice looks like here.
It goes way beyond just this one case. It touches on really fundamental questions about how our legal system works or how it's perceived to work and the role of that executive pardon power.
It leaves you with a lot to think about. For you listening, what does this particular case say about that tangle of justice, power, politics? How do you weigh these different stories, the conviction versus the pardon rationale?
Yeah, and that fundamental question, is this pardon power in a case like this acting as a sort of necessary safety valve on the justice system, or does it risk becoming a tool for political influence to potentially undermine it?
A really crucial question to consider.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have the ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.